morning, everybody, and welcome to our 8th steering group meeting of the project ALPTREES. Before we start with the keynote speakers, I have prepared some more or less technical slides for you. As you know, it's the 8th meeting already. We increased the number of steering group meetings massively because of the situations we had in our region in the Alpine Space. And we have prepared this agenda today for you, and I hope we will stick to the plan. So the idea is to keep the coffee breaks quite strict, and we will also record the first part of this meeting until the first coffee break, so that we can later maybe also share some of the keynotes with our stakeholders. And here, if you give us the permission, we would share the first part in the ALPTREES YouTube channel, which you probably know already, where we have stored a lot of our outputs from the tree talks, the podcast, as well as the children's song. Let's start with a look back. So it's almost a year ALPTREES has started. The time passed extremely fast. And of course, there is not a big, I would not have time to go through every detail we did. But when I was preparing this presentation, I really was astonished by the number and the high quality of things we worked on, we produced, and we started. And you probably remember this was our kick-off meeting in Vienna on the 15th of November. Still in person and without any masks. And well, all our following meetings looked more or less like this. We used a lot of tools from Skype to Zoom, and we made the transfer. We transferred our work very fast from in person to online, and a big thank you from my side that this was possible. I have now prepared some photos to see what we did. So many project partners were in the field and collecting data. Here you see Anja doing the field work for us, or Martin, who was collecting data on non-native trees in Austria, and also our colleagues from Klagenfurt, who were also doing some field research. And here you see also Alexander using quite unique excursion methods. And we were talking to stakeholders as good as this was possible. We gave a lot of presentations in front of, at different occasions. We went into the field with stakeholders, or presented it, our project, or represented our project also in quite official European events. A lot of us were taking a lot of photos of non-native tree species, so thank you for this. We could really increase the number of material we gathered in this first year. We were engaging with the public as good as possible through competitions like the children's song. I guess Petra is going to talk about this more, and we were able to do in February still the first tree talk in Vienna, and we also started to engage with the first school kids like here in Graz, and show them what tree species are and how to identify them. So after the kickoff meeting, we had a quite nice time with the setup activities. A big thank you to Petra and Peter. It's a real dream team of communication who have put together a wonderful homepage. Please revisit it. Everything we do is linked in this homepage. That's our archive, and this is what's going to last after the project end in 2022 in June. We also started our social media appearance. We have a very strong and well-visited Facebook page already, where with a lot of help of each partner, we had some, we had a lot of postings and a lot of ideas. And okay, so looking back, I really have to thank you all for your contributions, for your willingness to really work very hard under this under these circumstances, and we will also discuss where it's still lacking a little bit, where we need some more focus, and which things, of course, went very well. So looking back into the first year, I think it would be a nice idea to just recall the main outputs of our project so that we really, in our work in the next periods, focus on these outputs, which we defined in the beginning of the project. I will recall this for you quickly. We have the aim to develop a transnational strategy on the management and the responsible use of non-native trees. We will produce a risk assessment tool to assess the risk-benefit trade-offs for non-native tree species in urban and in rural areas, as well as in forests. We will develop risk maps and an open knowledge hub. So just to recall the outputs which we agreed on in the proposal, and I think we are on the best way to fulfill these outputs. And okay, I think you're familiar with the structure of our project. Let me recall this one more time. We are structured in 4 work packages with one main output linked to each work package, which leads in the end to quite specific objectives, which are our goals. And all in all, together with other Interreg Alpine Space projects, we aim to support the goal to protect and strengthen the conservation and ecological connectivity in the Alpine space. And among the first things we did after the kickoff meeting, after the setup activities, was the definition of the keywords, the definition of non-native trees. It sounds simple, but it was not, because we had very intensive, long discussions in the core group and with everybody interested on defining the keywords. And we agreed that for our work in our project, non-native tree species, which are also known as non-indigenous or alien or introduced species, or exotic trees, including all the breeds and hybrids, are species who are originally outside of the Alpine space and have intentionally or unintentionally introduced by human into the Alpine space. So just in comparison to this, native tree species are native to the Alpine space, just like the name says, and they are tree species who are naturally occurring in the Alpine space as a result of the post-glacial forest development. Then we also defined the potential invasive non-native trees, tree species which were introduced, which have established successfully and spread in the Alpine space and have a potential or actual risk to native biodiversity, ecosystem functions, and socioeconomic functions, including the human health. We have used several valid definitions which are used all over Europe and adapted it for our situation in the Alpine space. So our project structure and also the definitions have been translated in an abstract in all our languages and also published in the Rio Journal. So here you can also read about target groups and the contributions of this project in the regional strategies and policies. We are hoping that many, many more articles are going to follow, not only scientific articles, but also informal or newspaper articles and so on. So here, keep in mind that all these tools, all these things, they make us visible. So let's have another look into our Alpine space, into the region, which is a geographical, geopolitical, cooperational region. It has the core center of the Alps, but it also includes a lot of lowlands up to the Mediterranean and marine ecosystems. This is quite hard sometimes to explain when we are talking about Alpine space. Very often stakeholders were saying like, oh, but we are in Niederösterreich, we are not really working in the Alps. So it's always important to just to kind of clarify what the Alpine Space is. So here you see a map of it. It contains 40, it's divided in 48 regions and in 7 countries, speaking more than 4 languages. And so here you see the diversity of the region. About 70 million inhabitants are living in the Alpine Space, and it has a size of about 450 square kilometers. So here are just some data that might be interesting when you chat about the Alpine Space. The forest cover of the region is constantly increasing, as we have in the first data collection period in work package 1, and here a big thank you to Anja and Anja from the FOA. We have identified about 130 native tree species and 490 non-native tree species growing in the Alpine Space, in forests, in cities, in most of them in cities, and in peri-urban areas. When we have a look into the top 5 of the non-native tree species, I don't want to say too much because we will hear more in the work package leaders presentations. We identified in forests the top 5 which were reported to us, which we collected in the data, were Alcenegundo, Pinus strobus, and the Douglas fir, and the American oak and Robinia. And in urban areas, we have the most common one is Aesculus hypocastaneum, again Robinia, Celtis, Platanus, and Corylus. So you see, forests and cities have totally different tree species compositions, which is of course quite challenging, and this list, I guess, will also be changing when we gather more data. So this data collection is still on the way. We are still looking for data from tree cadastre data and national inventory data and so on, which we would like to include. And we will also include data from citizens by using the eNaturalist app. So here a big thanks to Dimitri and the colleagues from YASA who established in the first year, who started the project, who are quite familiar, quite expert on this form of data collection. And certainly this will be one of our highlights, hopefully in the next steering group meetings. We have also started to collect the monographs. This was, the idea was to collect not only quantitative data on non-native tree species, but also qualitative data. And we have created a list of the 50 non-native tree species of high importance in the Alpine Space. We invited about 30 authors and reviewers to contribute to build these monographs. So thanks to each of you who were functioning in this task. And within this task, we also contacted more than 25 experts outside of our project group, outside of our observer group, to give us input on how non-native tree species are used. So now we have a fantastic collection for each of the 50 species, describing the species description, like the physical appearance, the occurrence in its native range, describing the occurrence, the habitat and ecology in the Alpine Space, the drought resistance, the pests and diseases which are affecting the species, the management and use in forests in the Alpine Space, the management and use in urban areas in the Alpine Space. We have some information on the timber quality, use and trade for each species, and ecosystem services provided by the non-native tree species. We have collected information on the invasiveness and risks, and if it's invasive, if preventional measures or management measures were in place, and also how they were evaluated. And of course, we have all the bibliography, the external links and photos. This was an enormous piece of work, which wouldn't be possible if so many people would work together in a fantastic team led also by Alexander. So thank you very much, Alexander, from SFI in Slovenia, from Ljubljana, that you were coordinating this task. I think it's a fantastic collection that will help us to work on our deliverables, like for example, the report on the expert survey, the technical guidance, the knowledge transfer, and many, many, many things more. All these results will be also implemented in the Knowledge Hub, where we build up a database, a public one, with all the information on non-native tree species. So one of those deliverables are already online. That's the open database on the management measures for non-native trees. I'm sure Alexander will talk more about this, but here it's about collecting the information on ongoing and past management measures in the Alpine Space, but also sometimes elsewhere. And we have collected and collated the description of the measures, tried to identify the costs, the benefits of each management measure. And now we have started kind of a consultation round. So we are open for any recommendations, any new information, and it's for you to download under this link or on the homepage and on our cloud. Also free. We are also very welcoming to all stakeholders to give us a feedback, and maybe we can collect even more information on the management measures. We were working quite hard in work package 4 on the stakeholder survey. Stakeholders' knowledge on the risks and benefits of management of non-native tree species in urban areas, but also in forest ecosystems in the Alpine regions, are very important to us. We need to know how our practitioners out there, how the conservation managers, how the foresters, how the urban planners think about non-native tree species. So we created in a small working group with Anja Bindewald, René Herzariga, and Ana Sofia Vaz, from a scientist from Portugal, who we invited to join us. And a questionnaire, you all know this questionnaire, we were sharing this over a long time. Unfortunately, it's quite complicated to get answers from stakeholders during the summer period and also online, but we are constantly making progress, and we have about 400 responses so far. I will show you some preliminary results, although the survey is still open until the 1st of November. And here you, for example, see the differences between our countries, where we asked whether they think that non-native tree species are beneficial, not so beneficial, depend, that they have a risk, or must be eliminated. So you see differences that, for example, in Austria, it's quite divided. And for example, in Slovenia, the thoughts about risks are quite predominantly. This again supports our hypothesis that the different views of stakeholders also kind of underline the incoherent patchwork we have right now in the Alpine Space. So every region is managing non-native trees differently. We have a very diverse set of legislations, of policies, how to deal with non-native tree species. And we really hope that in this project, we will be one step closer to a joint and transnational strategy, so we all have a common ground on how to manage non-native tree species. So here, once again, the preliminary the first results are ready to be downloaded for you in the cloud, but also on the homepage. But we would like to keep the stakeholder survey open until the 1st of November, because we have just right this week collected about 3,000 valuable contacts in France, in Italy, in Switzerland, and in Austria, from garden planner to forest managers, and we want to reach them. So please help us to share this survey. We have prepared for you the PDFs or the links directly to the online form, where you can invite the stakeholders to give us their view on non-native trees. Good. So some other highlights were the tree talk in Vienna, which was quite an exciting event, public event. You will find also the podcasts, the first 3 episodes, on the YouTube channel. We are on the way to discuss the pedagogical concept, how to how to reach each of our target groups. You can see here in the left column, the target groups are very diverse, and we have a lot of deliverables, how to reach them, and we will for sure diversify this table. We have also in the last period started to produce the illustrations on non-native tree species, which will be used in the first handbook, in the identification handbook in this period. And this gives me already kind of the first view to the main activities and deliverables in period 1, which ends in December. So many of these activities have been started already. It does not mean that we are not working on any other things as well. I know that there's a lot of work going on in work package 2, but by end of this year, by end of this period, these are going to be our main focuses. So there might be something I missed. I'll be happy to add it. So in the very, very recent future, tomorrow, we are going to have the Slovenian stakeholder workshop in Ljubljana. So the preparations are running really well, and we have about, I think, 30 or 50 already. 30, Alexandra, I don't know exactly the number of people registered already, but we have a high number of stakeholders interested in joining us tomorrow in Ljubljana. In November, we will have the first ALPTREES webinar. If this format is successful, we can think of maybe doing more webinars. The work on the manual for site-specific risk assessment is something that is standing already on its own feet. So here we will have a highlight in the next period, sharing with you. Also today, we have dedicated a workshop from 11:45 to 1 o'clock on this manual. We will start conceptualizing the Knowledge Hub. Thank you very much for your feedbacks. We all agreed that the Knowledge Hub will have the domain non-native trees EU. We will start drafting the handbooks. There will be 3 of them. If there is time today, I'd like to discuss with you the content of each handbook. We will draft the training material set, which is the direct link already to our first keynote speaker, who will give us some who will share some expert knowledge on how to draft training material set or teaching materials. And we will conclude the research on the value of wood. And we will start the pilot actions. I'm very excited to hear about them today. And of course, we decided to organize a digital conference which should replace the conference which we had to cancel in Trento, which will take place on 2 days, on the 25th to 26th of February. And everybody, the public, is invited to submit abstracts and also to present their views, their work on non-native tree species in this conference. That was quite a long introduction to our meeting. Thank you very, very much for being here on time. And I would like to ask our first keynote speaker to start with his presentation.
So, good morning. I'm very happy to be here with you and to share with you some thoughts about educational work and about environmental and sustainability education and the development of teaching and learning materials. So first, only some words about me. I'm Matthias. I'm teaching and doing research at the University College of Teacher Education in Graz, so in the south of Austria. I'm living in Graz since 4 years, and so I'm professor of geography and economics education. Of course, there's interdisciplinary work with biology also and environmental education. And today, so the aim of my talk is to share with you some ideas about environmental and sustainability education, and of course also about how, with Katharina and the team, we were already discussing how to develop teaching materials. And so I would like to start with the activities that we have already thought about within the ALPTREES Interact project. Then I wanted to give you some short history of some background information about theoretical information about education for sustainable development, because it's a very broad field, interdisciplinary field, where the ALPTREES project and educational work within the project fits in also. And then I wanted to highlight within education for sustainable development the issues about awareness raising and ethical issues of sustainability education, and also some opportunities that gives nature immersion and also field trips within ESD, Education for Sustainable Development. And to conclude, I would like to give you some examples from former project, develop teaching materials that we have already developed, to give you some ideas what can be a result of teaching and learning materials for future students, before coming to the conclusion. When you have any questions during the presentation, please do not hesitate to ask or to give comments. I'm very happy to discuss different ideas with you. Okay, to start about the activities that we have already discussed with the team within the project. So first, the work package aims to develop teaching and training materials, like Katharina mentioned already. And of course, that is material that is tailored to the needs of different stakeholder groups. And we will submit it to the communication officer and then for editing and publishing at the end. So the material will be developed within a master's seminar at the University College of Teacher Education and also the University of Graz, because the University College of Teacher Education and the University of Graz, they propose the bachelor and master's degree for geography and economics education together, but also for other disciplines like biology and environmental education. So my students are in geography and economics education. It's a master's seminar that will start this winter semester. So in 1 week exactly. So of course, the project team will provide thematic guidance, and we are very happy, and the students also, to share the ideas and to have advice, because they are of course still studying and they need also a little bit of guidance and input for the development of materials. We were already thinking to organize a field trip, because so that students can have some input, some more information, detailed information about the topic, because sometimes they are not really specialized on non-native tree species. Of course, they can read books and articles about it, but it would be very nice and very informative that they have more and more detailed information from specialists. So from like you, when you give a lecture, or of course also when we visit interesting places that provide more information for them. So as I explained, the timescale is to develop the materials in the winter semester, now in 2020-21, in German and also English, but of course the materials can be translated in all different languages like French, Slovenian and Italian also. We're already talking about the topic ideas, like tree species diversity, ecosystem services and trees, climate change in cities and forests, dendrology, potentials and risks of non-native trees, invasiveness of non-native trees, and perhaps also risk management. And as we have done the last time, that one group provides materials how to organize a field trip. So to give you some more background information on sustainability education or education for sustainable development. So as for probably the most of you already know, so the concept of sustainable development has become a guiding principle for society since the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in '92 in Rio de Janeiro. And of course, many other conferences were organized about sustainable development since the beginning of the 90s. There's also the climate change summit organized by the United Nations nearly every year, and where different stakeholders and governments discuss how to provide and how to promote a more sustainable future for our Earth. Of course, when more than 170 governments commit to such a concept, it has a great weight, and the term of sustainability is increasingly used by different groups, by political parties, by NGOs, by different different various groups. And a citation that I often like to cite is a British geographer, Eric Swingerdew, who has written in 2007 that I've not been able to find a single source that is against sustainability. Greenpeace is in favor, George Bush Jr. and Sr. are, the World Bank and its chairman are, the Pope is, my son Arno is, the rubber tappers in the Brazilian Amazon are, Bill Gates is. All are presumably concerned about long-term social environmental survival of parts of humanity, but most keep doing business as usual. So that is said that sustainability is used by everyone and everybody in every situation, but really transformation is hard to realize, and often business people, but also political parties keep just doing business as usual. How can we provide change? Of course, education has a role to play for the transformation of societies. So first, there are the two terms of environmental education and education for sustainable development. So environmental education, if we call it a certain curriculum, goes, of course, beyond knowledge. It's an important goal also for the development of active citizenry. And sometimes it's quite old term also, environmental education, but the adjective environmental is sometimes a significant barrier because it distinguishes environmental education from other disciplines. And that's why it's often playing outside central educational debates. While education for sustainable development is an interdisciplinary concept, clearly interdisciplinary. And there are sometimes clear distinctions being made between the two terms, environmental education and education for sustainable development. But often there's a considerable elision between these two terms. So they are often used in parallel. And Bob Jickling and Arjen Walls from the Netherlands and from Canada noted already in 2012, what is actually done on the ground in terms of teaching and learning is more important than the label under which these activities and actions take place. So it's not so important if we call it environmental education or ESD or even EED. Sometimes we use also the term environmental and sustainability education. It's also a term that is used to include both terms in one term. it's not so important, the term we use, but it's important what is done on the ground. The term Education for Sustainable Development, ESD, was provided by the United Nations and introduced gradually in formal education. So it should be included in different curricula in schools, and it was provided by the United Nations Decade of Education for Sustainable Development between 2005 and 2014. This program has been followed by the Global Action Program, the GAP, on Education for Sustainable Development, that was finished in 2019, and then this program was followed by the ESD 2030, which is running from 2020 to 2030, and ESD 2030 should provide and promote, encourage students to learn more about sustainable behavior, to be qualified as a multiplicator, and also to promote teachers to transmit knowledge, but also methods about sustainability education. So ESD is like a new global framework on ESD for the period 2020 to 30. And it scales up from different actions like the other programs that I already mentioned. ESD 2030 is a key element for quality education also, and a key enabler of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, so the SDGs. There's a special attention also to individual transformation, societal transformation, and to technological advances. So it should promote the different SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So the Sustainable Development Goals are a collection of different 17 global goals, which are behind over 160 different targets. It was set up by the United Nations General Assembly in 2015 for the year 2030. So I will not talk about the different 17 goals now, but I would like to highlight two goals. The goal number 4, which is quality education with different targets. One target, for example, is to increase the number of youth and adults to have relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills for employment, decent jobs, and also on entrepreneurship. It's also a target to increase the supply of qualified teachers, so future teachers, including through international cooperation for teacher training. That's what we are also a little bit doing with the project. International cooperation for teacher training, but also in developing countries. And another goal of the 17 that I would like to highlight is the goal number 15, because it's called Life on Land, and it's also about biodiversity. And one of the 12 targets should promote the implementation of sustainable management of all types of forests. It's also the aim to halt deforestation and to restore degraded forests, and substantially increase afforestation and reforestation globally. So non-native tree species have an important role also in a sustainable management of forests. That's why I wanted to highlight this goal of the SDGs. And this drawing is a drawing of a student in France from Nancy, because when I did empirical work on sustainability, I ask students in high schools and secondary schools how they imagine sustainable futures for themselves. And the drawings show also that forests play an important role for the young people, for the students, for a sustainable future. So I would like to show you only 2-3 drawings who prove that forests are an important issue for the sustainable futures for the younger generations. So this is one from Nancy. The other one here is from Graz, from Austria, from a secondary school. So Zukunft means future. And so trees and also turtles, plastic are important issues when we ask 15, 16, 70 years old students how they imagine their future and what is important for a sustainable future. One other example, more trees, mehr Bäume, is also one claim of the students here. This drawing comes also from Graz, from Austria, from an upper secondary school here. Yeah, and as I mentioned in ESD, the United Nations aim to include and to implement sustainability in the different curricula of the different disciplines, in all disciplines, from mathematics, about biology, about arts and music to geography. And in geography in Austria, so ESD was implemented also through different key concepts. So recently, 2 years before, there was a new curriculum set up for upper secondary schools in geography and economics, and 13 key concepts were introduced, going from work conditions, about scale, and about consumption. And one of the 13 key concepts is called life quality and sustainability. That presents a guiding principle for ecological changes in society. So the aim of the curriculum is also a change of mentality and of lifestyle. Change of mentality, of course, means awareness rising. It's a kind of ethical education. Ethical education is provided through different disciplines and also within education for sustainable development and also environmental education. The British geographers Vara and Scott distinguished 3 different types of education for sustainable development. So the first type is to promote behaviors, transformation of behaviors in ways of thinking. So where the need is clearly identified and agreed also. So it's an ethical education, and they call it learning for sustainable development. The second type of ESD is more to build capacity to think critically about what experts say about sustainable development ideas. So the aim is that students explore contradictions and they develop own ideas how sustainable futures can be modified and how they imagine a sustainable futures in ways of living. So it's called more learning not for, but learning as sustainable development. And the third type, so it's not only about, it's also about ethical education and content knowledge, but it's more in a transformative way. So it's a transformative and expensive learning that may represent a shift in the object of an entire activity system. So to change the way of thinking and to combine moral issues, ethical issues with critical thinking and content knowledge also. So this first type of ESD, so the more ethical issues of education, and of course awareness rising, has been criticized. First, different researchers, colleagues, has seen that ESD supports forms of practical instruction to help turn ethical obligations into actual conduct and action. And so this ESD1 type can be seen as a form of ethical education that embraces universal aspects and concepts because it's seen as universal. And the critiques are that this approach fails to challenge the status quo and supports economic primacy. So that we have to change the system, not only to promote how students should act. So this allows a neoliberal agenda to dominate in education policy. So it promotes a certain dominant ideology, and it's a kind of feel-good education. So it's seen if you behave in a certain way, more sustainable, you buy organic food, you take public transport, you don't throw waste in the forests, then you are sustainable and everything is done. So that's the kind of, they call it feel-good education. And often politicians and businesses often push away the responsibility to individuals, so to the consumer. And Doreen Massey already asked if the responsibility placed on the consumer not overestimate the individual's capacity to affect sustainability patterns and global changes. In the context of climate change, Shove even argues that the responsibility of responding to climate change is thought to lie with individuals whose behavioral choices will make the difference. So individuals, of course, have a role to play, but they can't change, they will not make the difference. That's the argument here. How can we deal with these ethical questions in education? One response can be nature immersion, field trips, and other alternative forms of sustainability and environmental education. Because it's a kind of authenticity of learning that have two fundamental features defined by Siptorp, that inherent properties of the real world environment are provided, and it's a kind of authenticity of the social environment. So learning in nature helps students to see interrelationships and to make interdisciplinary connections first. And also this kind of nature immersions, when we go with students in the fields, in the forest, then kind of forest education lead to an increasing acceptance of sustainable land use, and of course also to better understand ecological and social consequences. And it's a kind of transhuman experience. That was what was Weston in the beginning of the 90s called already non-anthropocentrism, so where humans not in the center of reflections. And with these kind of nature immersion, students can learn about intrinsic values of nature that are not provide that humans are always in the middle of the reflections, but they have their own value. And so extracurricular learning places can be seen as educational actors also. So that offers a participatory venue and contributions to sustainability education. So it can be eye-opening experiences, and the place where field trips can take place, where students can go, refers also to historical and psychological aspects of individuals. So, and then students can make a more than human experience. And of course, then it's not only the right and wrong scheme that is provided and that is taught, but students can see that it is more complex and discover the different interconnectedness and interrelations. Because often what we have seen with the drawings also, students distinguish clearly what is sustainable, what is not. So it's quite a right, wrong, and that is, remember, a moralizing form of education. Field trips that we have organized together with the BFW also in Vienna, to national parks here and to a forest business. So the two photos are from June in this year. Despite the Corona situation, we could organize this one-day field trip with students from Graz, future teachers, geography teachers, and so it was a quite enriching experience for them to get more and very inspiring information about the establishment of the National Park Gesäuse, about the biodiversity aspects, and also about forest management and forest businesses. We have seen here in Frohnleiten, so it's 1 hour north of Graz, approximately. Yeah, so these examples from the field trips lead me to my last point, that we have already developed teaching materials within another project. That was the project 2020, the year of forest biodiversity. And there we have already developed teaching and learning materials for different topics: biodiversity, field trip organization, forest management, ecosystem diversity, climate change, protected areas, and the last group, what we can do ourselves. Here are some examples of teaching materials. First, this is a quartet playing, because something that students can play is often changes the methods of teaching in the classroom, so that they can discover themselves within playing, which is often good for memorizing also, and discovering new things in a play mode. So these are examples from a quartet playing about national parks and protected areas, that deals with tourism, with the animals living in the park and different plants, that you can here see 3 cards from 3 different national parks: Donauauen, Hohe Tauern, and Kalkalpen. Another example are different professions related to forest management, where students have to find the description of a profession with a photo and put them together, how they fit together. And it's a kind of discovering while playing with other students also. Yeah, so I come to the conclusion. Such field trips and also playing in the classroom allow students to reflect on the emotional and affective relationships that they have with objects, with food, with animals, with plants, because it's learning with all senses. A nature immersion and forest education can so make a great contribution to awareness raising, but also to the concept of interdependency, and also to promote critical thinking. It's of course a big motivation also, and it can promote interest and enthusiasm that are necessary to develop sustainable solutions, because students can only develop sustainable solutions and ideas and for transformation patterns if they learn with enthusiasm and interest. The development of teaching materials provided also in a form of citizen science, so together with students, encourages students to reflect their own behavior and to reflect also educational patterns, to develop critical thinking, and of course, to reflect their own environmental perception. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention. This is, I finished with a student drawing from Graz. Also, the student has provided that it's about awareness raising, that the time counts for the transformation of society for a more sustainable future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I would like to introduce our next presenter. It's Martin Braun from the University of Life Sciences in Vienna. We will make a thematical, quite a big step from environmental education to the use and economic value of non-native timber in the Alpine Space, or non-native wood. Thank you very much, Martin, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. As Katharina introduced, I will talk today about researching the economic value of non-native tree species within the Alpine Space. I am working at the Institute of Marketing Innovation at BOKU, and I am a subcontractor for the deliverable T3. And the focus of this is to research the value of wood of non-native tree species and the development of the process of its usage in the recent years, and to research technical specifications of the NNT wood and estimate values for certain target species. And our task, or our goal within this task, is to analyze the process from the forest to the product, so to investigate the entire value chain for selected species, and also to highlight transnational trends in NNT utilization in the Alpine Space. Why did we offer to do this? At the Institute of Marketing Innovation, we already conducted research since many years on this topic. The first started with a master thesis in 1998 and was developed into a project about NNT use in Austria. So this was focusing on Austrian market framework conditions of NNT use. And the focus in the first studies were sawmills, since Austria is a very sawnwood-centric country. We apply methods of empirical social science. In this case, it was structured telephone interviews with with 40 interviews in the pre-test and 174 final interviews with quite a high response rate. And besides the sawmilling industries, also foresters and other wood processing businesses beside the sawmills, so in the value chain after the sawmills, were investigated, as well as manufacturing companies. And since then, there were several research contributions to this topic on which we want to build and to expand for the ALPTREES project, of course, in a wider scope, investigating the Alpine Space. For the Alpine Space, we also reviewed secondary data. One aspect was to look to investigate NNTs with respect to wood auctions or wood submissions. By now we started in summer this year. By now we obtained data for Austria for about 15 years. For wood submissions for Slovenia it's a bit less, and we looked here into the wood auction prices. So this is to highlight that some NNTs can gain quite high prices in high grade auctions, and for Austria the most popular also in Slovenia is black walnut, but we also have poplars, black locust, northern red oak, Douglas fir, tree of heaven, Gledicia and platanes. And in Slovenia, as I said, also black walnut, northern red oak, black locust, Douglas fir and platanes are the most popular trees in auctions. There are also some other species not mentioned here. We are still looking into, so we looked at the summary data and we now looked more into the detailed tables, because sometimes the species are mentioned there more in detail, sometimes not. It always depends. In the next step, so there's also a master student working with me who couldn't make it today, Camila Maciel, and she is writing her master thesis on this, and with the focus to conduct a literature review. We know since the beginning that the focus on NNTs, the focus is mostly about forest management, biodiversity, and there is a lack of research on market applications and use cases. This is normal because it's a niche market and the timber volumes are very small. And so the focus is to shed more light on this third point through expanding the review through methods of empirical social science. But we also reviewed previous research projects, especially Interreg and cost action projects. One was conducted at BOKU, where Katarina played an important role. And here we have some market data available in addition to the BOKU research mentioned earlier. Especially the cost action next was important here. So this is to assemble relevant market data for timber species, and the master thesis expands this by semi-structured interviews. So this was one central report on the right. So for the master thesis, we expect that the regions are quite differently positioned in terms of forest activity modalities, wood types and utilized volumes, but also the economic value of NNT and sometimes the acquisition routes. And because here the data is quite scarce, we will apply semi-structured interviews to investigate use cases of interest, and we designed these interviews, the semi-structured interviews, quite flexible, because we assumed that the use cases will be quite diverse in some regions for some applications. Of course, for some applications, they are less diverse, for example, for use of Douglas fir. And so here we have a rough interview guide, which has some flexibility through the semi-structured design. Our goal is to investigate 3 market niches per country, which is part of the Alpine Space. So in total, we expect to conduct 21 interviews. So one niche is the sawmilling industry still. Then we have the producers further up the value chain. And then we also investigate businesses or individuals on the final stage, which can also include artists. So we try to capture in all these 21 interviews along these 3 niches: sawmills, veneer wood production, building material production, carpenters, raised beds, playgrounds, musical instruments, and coffins. And for some of these applications, some of these applications have very specific preferences of some non-native tree species. You heard from us probably already, so we tried to use, of course, the ALPTREES partner network and online methods to invite potential interview partners. We encountered one challenge, that our master student is an English speaker, and in some countries, especially Austria, but also France, it's sometimes a bit difficult to then, or the readiness of interview partners diminishes, and we are working on solving that currently. The plan of this interview aspect of the master thesis project is to recruit participants to encompass the diversity in the various Alpine Space region, and thus recruit participants which are which show characteristics which diverge from other regions, except sawmilling industries, for example. So we try to capture some commonalities, but also to capture differences between regions, and then conduct the in-depth interviews. This will be then transcribed and coded using memos and the coding dictionary, and then we hope to be able to systematically categorize the NNT use and its economic value within the Alpine Space. Yes, so the initial plan was to conduct these 21 interviews. I just now again show the regions. We see it in many of the ALPTREES presentations, but it's important, I think, to highlight this regional diversity. And we see with 3 interviews per countries, it's not so much, but if they are, so we try to, as I said, to capture the regional differences also. So we think that with 21 interviews, we will not get comprehensive information, of course, on NNT use, but we deem this to be quite impossible within the scope of this task. But I think we can highlight some uses and highlight some use cases with a focus on niche applications on NNT use, and then highlight also the economic value or some benefits of NNT use. And as I said, we try to categorize then our interview partners in 3 stages of the value chain, which I mentioned already. As I said, we started in summer, so by now we don't have so many results yet, but we have some. In summer, the contacting interviewees was a bit difficult. So in summer, we could only manage to get 2 responses and 2 scheduled interviews. I got the information that in the last 10 days, there was significant progress on this. So we think that by the end of October, we will have much more interviews conducted, and that we can show a first or a next stage in results and in applications of NNTs, and to highlight the economic use. One example you see in the top right, it's black, it's parquet flooring made from black locust, which is marketed by Weizsäcker. This is also more of a niche product, so most of the parquet flooring is made of oak, but black locust has properties which are beneficial for the use as flooring material, and also the color, so it gets more popular, sometimes as a substitute for walnut. And this is a product, it is still a niche application, but it's it's already a higher, a higher marketable value. Then I want to show you some results or some quotes just from the interviews conducted, because the evaluation is work in progress. For example, here we see speakers for smartphones, so you can put the smartphone, and the lower part is then being amplified through wooden speakers made from Paulovnia. And here one interview partner stated that the danger in the end is not as big as the advantages of this NNT product. I think that if you manage well, you can get more benefits than if you just try to manage the native species and expect them to naturally succeed under climate change conditions. Sometimes it's harder. So this is these speakers are made by he calls himself biocarpenter, so he actively tries to use and facilitate the use of non-native tree species. Another example from a French interview partner was about Douglas fir, which is one of the more popular NNTs in the Alpine Space. Because of its success on the market and in the context of climate change, it would be interesting to test Douglas fir in the Alpine mountains on appropriate sites. The Alpine Convention does not allow plantations for production, but experimental ones are possible. Some actors would like to investigate Douglas behavior on new locations. So there is sometimes also the need or the demand of some stakeholders to increase the use of some NNT species. This is, of course, a delicate topic which needs to be investigated not only from the market aspects. Then from Slovenia, we got many nice pictures and many nice potential applications of NNTs, where one partner stated, we have these species here and we have to learn how to use them. In ecological terms, forest communities are constantly changing and income of new species is somehow expected. And we see that there are applications, and it is important to consider the use value of specific wood and the specific potential applications of some species to generate a benefit, or to maybe see the value of NNTs in the forest and then also in the wood-based value chain. One other example from our Italian biocarpenter is this beehive, which is also from Paulovnia. Here is stated, for me, the wood is really good. The problem is that the carpenters and woodworkers' acceptance. They used to work with the traditional wood species and are conservative regarding new uses. It will take some time for the mentality to change, but it will certainly change in the future. And this I also see when I look at the oldest study in Austria from 1998, that the acceptance was quite low, and some producers, for example sawmills, they use NNTs, but they use them together with other species. So if we have a hardwood sawmill in Austria, they usually, sometimes they don't have the focus on NNTs. Sometimes we need to explain what we mean by it also. So there was, in 1998, the only species accepted was Douglas fir, and we see, at least in Austria already, a change and a bit of a widening of the spectrum of the potential uses of NNTs, and that this view is also slowly changing in some stakeholders. Then one more quote about Robinia. Among non-native tree species, the most important species in Piemonte is Robinia pseudoacacia. Farmers surely like Robinia because it's easy to manage and it provides income streams. Robinia pseudoacacia is used for industrial use, for furniture, and sometimes for floors. So Robinia is quite popular in these applications. It is also used for playgrounds sometimes. So there is certainly also already the stakeholders see the benefits, and it helps us to map potential applications. And with this, I come to the outlook. One challenge is that technical specifications are rather hard to define for some species because of the diverse wood properties. This heavily depends on the species, so we have quite many use cases for black locust and for Douglas fir. So for some applications it's easier, but for some applications it's really hard. What we are currently working, besides on conducting the interviews, so my focus is now the mapping of potential use cases for NNT species, and here to find or to identify potential applications for the use cases, and then to highlight or to investigate the market value, also include information market value from secondary data and historical data. And this secondary data analysis is still work in progress. It will be finished about mid or rather end of October, and we expect to have now more progress in autumn. Interviewees get also more active, so we expect to really have some progress on the interviews and to be finished by the end of 2020. Yes, this was from my side. Thank you for your attention. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Martin, for your very illustrative presentation on the timber survey or the value of wood of non-native tree species. Certainly some surprising items. Could I ask you to, you stopped sharing the screen. We have time for one or two questions. Is there a question from the audience? Okay. Alexander?
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for nice presentation. I wonder, you have told us about problems of willingness of people who will give the interviews.
Yes.
Did you think about I don't know, if you write an interview and give them like questionnaire, maybe the language is quite a big barrier. So
our worry is that if we prepare a written interview, that we lose a lot of flexibility for situational, like secondary questions. And I think with NNTs, this is very important. I mean, if we don't have enough progress by the end of October, I think we need to consider this. So thank you for this proposal, this idea. I don't know how, so another idea was that maybe two persons, so that Camilla or me call some potential interview partners, and maybe someone in a target region can assist us with language matters. So in Austria now, Camilla works with a bit with BFW, so she has presence at the BFW with some German speaker, and I also try to recruit now businesses in Vienna, because for example, playground producers or raised bed producing companies, they're usually rather small, and if you ask them to conduct an interview in English, they completely withdraw. So they need some kind of first contact in German, for example, and then if they see, okay, if there are two people, one German speaker and one English speaker, they usually anyway conduct the interview in English. So because it's this, usually they have some basic knowledge of English, but if this is a problem, maybe it would be good to partner with while conducting the interviews.
Thank you for all the partners who have already also
Fred,
supported us
Yes,
with the
very
interview.
quick.
Fred?
Yeah, very quick question. For the French participation, on the first questionnaire, spruce was considered as a non-native trees. So the two colleagues for which I give the name as a, let's say, strong reaction. As
really?
yeah, they have been recontacted or not? Or should I recontact them and said, yes, it was a mistake for sure? I know that.
Could you recontact them? Yep. So the questionnaire version I have, it certainly doesn't have spruce on it.
Okay. So if you can give me, send me back the new questionnaire, and then I will push them to this one, because the first question from them was okay.
Okay, yes, I will talk with my student if something happens. I hope it won't happen again. But if you could help us to just
no problem, I will do.
Mobilize them. So.
And now it's time for our last speaker for this morning. She's already waiting there. It's a young researcher, a very gifted researcher at the BFW. I will introduce you right now. So, okay, thank you for sharing the screen already. So our next speaker is Anita Zolles with the first insights from a climate research forest in Austria, showing some examples how we work with non-native tree species. Anita, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Katharina, and warm welcome also from my side. So I'll be talking about our project called the Klimaforschungswald, or in English, the Climate Research Forest. And to start off my presentation, I want to give a quick overview of our project. So we have an exceptionally long runtime of 11 years, and we're researching on an area of 7.3 hectares. I put a map on the upper right of the slide, so you can see we're located in the east of Austria, and I also put in some pictures to give an overview of how the area looks like. The 7.3 hectares we're researching on are not connected, so there are 3 different plots. Plot 1, you get an idea of the different tree species we planted. And there's also one area called the Entwicklungsfläche, or in English, the development area, where trees were planted 10 years ago. On all the other plots, trees were planted from last October until maybe in November we can finish the last plantings. The second plot is the smallest one with 0.8 hectares, and the third plot is again a little bit bigger with 2.5 hectares. And this is also the only plot that is located in an area where there's a lot of forest cover. So you can see on the other 2 plots, there's a lot of ocker land around our research areas. I want to go over a few of our goals for the project. So the main goal is, of course, forest conservation. And what we do here is we test different native and non-native tree species to check out how they perform, which issues occur, etc., etc. The second goal is the preservation of the recreation function of forest land. This is of course connected to the first goal, but it is especially important in this area of Austria where we have Pannonian climate. It is already very dry and we're expecting it to get much drier in the future due to climate change. The next important goal is of course communication and education. We do this via our website or social media. So Facebook and Instagram, there is a page for the Klimaforschungswald, and with a nature trail with information boards that will be revealed in 2021 if everything goes well. The last goal I want to mention, and I also want to focus on, is the effect of forest land on climate. And I want to go over our measurement concept. And for me personally, one big motivation was the high interest in urban forestry, especially, of course, from cities. And this is, of course, partly because of the increase of heat days due to climate change. So we know that in general, the daily maximum temperature in forest land is way lower than in open land. And with climate change, we know that heat days are getting more and more. So this, of course, is an interesting concept. But one thing I think is often overlooked is that the daily minimum temperature is higher in forest land. So this is very important because the human body needs, especially on hot days, low night temperatures for relaxation. And this can be a very dangerous development. So if days are getting hotter and also during the nighttime we have these tropical nights where temperature does not go below 21 degrees, this is very dangerous. So we have to keep in mind in urban forestry not only the advantages but also the disadvantages, speaking of the higher minimum temperature in forest land. So what we did for the first part of our measurement system is we put in air temperature and relative humidity measurements, and we put these measurements at the two different plots. So for plot 1, we have one measurement in young forest land that was already planted in 2019. So the trees are not very high, they're about 50 centimeters. And we also put a measurement into the developed forest land, so the development area where trees were planted 10 years ago, so they're about 10 to 12 meters high. And of course, we put temperature and relative humidity measurement as well as also precipitation measurement in open land. So you see this at plot 2. And even if it does not look like it on this picture, but there's a big free area, and the measurements we're conducting there are also following the World Meteorological Guidelines for meteorological measurements. So what can we do with these three very simple measurements? First of all, we can compare the development of relative humidity and air temperature in young forest land in comparison to already developed forest land. So we can also use the second measurement as a kind of look into the future, what we might expect in 10 years. And of course, we can also compare how is this different to an open land station. So how is the temperature course and the relative humidity course daily, but also annually, and when can you expect such differences? So in urban forestry, you sometimes also need to plant smaller trees, and of course you want to see an impact, and yes, when can you expect such an impact and how big will it be? The second part of our measurement system is the soil temperature and moisture measurement. This focuses more on the tree specifics. So what we did is we bought soil moisture and temperature sondes. They go into 90 centimeters of depth, and there's a measurement every 10 centimeters. So we have per sonde 18 measurements because it's always soil temperature and moisture, and we're measuring every 15 minutes. The first sondes we put, so for each of these points we put two sondes because of course the soil can be inhomogeneous And so to compensate for these possible differences, we wanted to get a higher insurance. For the first part, we put sonds into coniferous species, so at the young forest land, and the second part is the sonds in the deciduous species, so we can compare how are differences in soil temperature and moisture for these two different forest types. You might ask, why didn't you just use air temperature measurements? But of course, the air temperature is a very homogeneous parameter. So for the small area we're looking at, there wouldn't be any noticeable differences. And the soil temperature and moisture measurements are very local. So we can see these effects a little clearer. And then we also put two sonds into the deciduous species, so the developed forest land, to again have a look into the future of what we might expect in 10 years for the deciduous species. Yes, I think that's basically everything from our measurement system. And to close my presentation, I just wanted to give a quick overview of some of the species we're planting. So we have a lot of different native and non-native tree species. But I think that's everything from my side so far. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anita, for your quick overview of a very applied side research project, which fits very well also to the ALPTREES objectives. Are there any questions for Anita? Okay. Andre?
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much, Anita, for interesting presentation. I have a question. Do you also measure response of trees to those factors? What measurements do you take in terms of tree species, for example, height or anything else?
Oh, yes, we plan to do this during the project. So now at the moment, the trees are very small. But we plan to regularly check in on them, also get the information, and also test the soil, for example. So the height and also the diameter, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. Any other questions?
More a proposal than a question.
Yes.
Back this last synthetic table. Maybe we have to think about such very synthetic table in addition with our different trees description.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that it's very clear, it's very simple. It's you can have in one look, let's say, all the information that you are looking for. So maybe we have to think about something like that.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly a very nice input, Anita. Thank you very much also for presenting the information. I hope you enjoyed this morning, and we will continue then with the presentation of the work package leaders, followed by the presentations, mini presentations of the partners, those who want to share their progress and their information for next periods. Yeah, thank you very much and enjoy your coffee break.